You're listening to 18 Minutes with Satyal and Silwal. I'm Satyal.
And I'm Silwal, and we're a weekly podcast from the Himalayas.
When it's a Tuesday and it's 7:30, you know it's time for perspectives, conversations, and stories.
Satyal, hold on. Before we go on to this episode, I want to talk about the last episode on the filler episode, right? So, one of the pros or cons, if you take it in any way that you like, was if you take a filler year, you might get married a little later. That might be a pro for you, that might be a con for you. So
Is it a pro for you or is it a con?
ask my parents.
Uncle, auntie, if you're listening to this episode right now, please write to me.
I'm sure they are. You know, the moment I recorded the filler episode, they were asking me about, you've taken your filler year, now it's over, now start working.
That's the worst thing that can happen to you, alright? You've been telling the world that they need to do a filler year, and now you'll be starting on your education right away.
No worries, mom and dad, I'll start working on it soon.
Alright, so that was the last episode. If you haven't heard about it, just go back to our last episode and listen to the filler year episode of Satyal and Silwal. But for this episode, we have a guest with us. Silwal, do you have any guesses who the guest is?
I have no idea.
He's right in front of you.
I'm trying to build up suspense, right? Come on, Satya.
Sorry, man. Anyways, our guest for today is a poet and a writer, and he's here all the way from India, currently working as a faculty member at Jambori Education. His name is Abhijit Musafir Das.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much, Satyal and Silwal. Thank you so much. It is a pleasure for me to be here, and I'm really grateful to both of you guys to give me the chance to come here on your brilliant show. I've been following it for the last 2-3 months once I got to know about it, and it's just amazing.
It's great to know that at least someone follows us.
Right. So why Musafir? Right.
Oh yes. That is a very interesting question. I have been, traveling quite a bit from the last 2 years because of the nature of my job. And Musafir is like my pen name, I write poetry, and Musafir is like a traveler who experiences life and he writes about his experiences.
So 2 out of 3 people in this episode is a traveler.
Absolutely. I think, Silwal, you are the other guy who travels a lot. So please tell us, why do you travel a lot so much?
I just need to get out of my daily routine. Once you get out somewhere, you're just in a different zone. It's a different life that you're living, and then once you come back, you're again back to your normal life, and you get energized every time you go out.
Reinvigorate yourself, right?
Absolutely.
That's my reason for it.
All right, but we've called our guest here to talk about, what have we called him in for?
So it's more about reading, writing, because he's an aspiring novelist, and he's trying to get his first novel out. So we'll talk about that a little in a while. But right now, let's start with reading. And how do we, we know that it's important to read.
Yeah.
We know it's important that books are better than movies. We all know that. But how do you start reading, and what's your process in it? So,
yeah, sure. To be honest with you guys, reading started by default with me. I belong to a family where everybody is into books and writers, but by default I was the other guy. I was a misfit in my family. I was the guy who was more into playing and traveling outside, and so me and my brother, when we were growing up together, that is when there were times when my brother would say, he would refuse to play with me. He would say, listen, if you're bored, you got to find a book to entertain yourself. I will not be there all the time with you. I have my own life. I have my own perspectives. I have my own friend circle. So by default, my brother compelled me, indirectly to start reading. And then it started in my 7th or 8th standard. And so reading just happened by default to me. But once I started reading, I think Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, or if I am right, would be the first novel that I read. I loved the character of Pip, the protagonist of that book, and after that it has been smooth sailing for me. Books and writers is what. And then I would actually like to pass on the question to Satyal, because I know you also read a lot. So how did you start reading?
This great man right here.
It's
Silwal.
Oh, amazing.
I don't remember any other book that I read during my school days, but Silwal is my friend from my undergraduate school. So one day he recommended this, because we used to talk a lot about education. He recommended this book called Tuesdays with Murray, and he talked about how there's this professor, he's gonna die, and it's his last lecture with his students. So you should try that out.
Spoilers away.
Right. So he recommended me that book. I read that book, and after that, again, he recommended me a second book, Siddhartha. And I think Siddhartha, in a way, changed my life in a positive light. So it's because of great friends like Silwal.
Oh, so Silwal gets the credit. Can we have a round of applause for Silwal?
You owe us Momo after that.
Sure.
How did reading start with
for
you,
me,
Silwal?
I am a single child, right? So you had a brother who said, he was not going to be with you. I had no one to talk to, right?
He had not met Satyal yet, so he needed to make do with books.
So what made you?
I was in school one day, and there's this big library in our school, and I was just going because reading is the next big thing. Everyone's talking. I just went to a shelf and I saw this book called The Subtle Knife. And I loved the cover, so I judged the book by its cover. You judged the book by its cover? I literally judged the book by its cover.
Oh my God.
And I, there was this magical knife, and this knife was going to do so many things. So that's how I got into it. And then I'm more of a fiction reader. I don't love non-fiction self-help books. I learn for myself, but fiction was my go-to, and that's how it started. And slowly I've come into Tuesdays with Maury and Siddhartha and other books, but yeah, that's how I judged a book by its cover first.
That's so nice of you to tell us.
Nice of you to judge a book by its cover. Anyway, so judging by what we've said right now, so it basically comes as in the form of a default, or when you're talking to friends. So when you're around friends that read books, then that's probably the best way of
it helps a lot. Absolutely, I agree with you. And in fact, once I came in touch with you guys, I remember our conversations would always be about books, writers, and that is the magic of reading. You get a high talking about writers, you get a high talking about books, and for creative people like Satyal, you would agree with me. For creative people,
I'm
not creative, right?
You're the traveler, so you should stay away from this conversation.
No, I'll give him credit. Silwal, even you are a creative guy, so you would know it is like oxygen for all of us. Creativity, our discussions, over a cup of coffee, our discussions in a cafe or after a drink or two. These discussions are like oxygen for writers like you and me. Satyal, you agree?
Yeah, but one thing I want to bring up here is a lot of people, we say writing is good for the soul, that we need to write a lot, right? But people usually look at themselves and say, I cannot write. Writing is just not for me. Is it true? Is it that, writing is for specific people who are writers?
That is a very interesting question, Satyal. Thank you for asking that. I would be honest with all the people here. Writing came by default to me, and it is by looking at her and getting inspiration from my mother, I started writing poetry. So I remember, it happened by default again, and gradually I love the process of writing where I'm expressing myself and I'm traveling and I'm seeing new people. In fact, once I've traveled to so many places in Kathmandu, it has been an exhilarating process for me to come across the amazing creativity with the people here, with the climate here, with the location here. It's just been an unending creative process for me. I would like to pass on the question to Silwal here, because you also travel quite often.
Yeah, he's a traveler, not the creative guy. Anyway,
so how do you manage to write? How do you write?
For me, this might sound cliched, but I have to be inherently sad in order to write. Because when I'm happy, I'm in my jolly mood. I'm celebrating life with everyone. But once I'm sad, once I'm contemplating life and reflecting on my life, and that's when I take my paper and pen out, and that's how I write. So even when I travel, there are snippets when I really feel about when I look at the nature, and if I'm traveling in a bus, if some line comes to me, then I jot it down in a small diary that I take with me. Not always though. I have a book more with me to read, because I think when I have a book with me, I'm traveling two journeys. So one is my real journey, the other one is the fantasy that I'm going into.
That is profound.
That's beautifully.
So in one journey, I'm actually traveling to two different places. That's my reading writing process. But Satyal, you're more of a blog writer, and you write about helping people, and you have personal blogs as well. How do you come up with your writing?
I think my creative process is I'm more creative when I'm riding my scooter. Okay. So don't be surprised if someday I just ran into one of those cars in front of me, because I'm thinking a lot, and as soon as I get off my bike, I jot down the points that I've written, and immediately in the same night I write about or blog about the same thing. Whereas those are personal things, but the times when I have to write for Himalayan Times and for my client who are doing content writing, I'm forced to be in a schedule. So there are days when I have to sit down and brainstorm within myself to write. So that's another creative process there.
Making it a circle and bringing back to Abhishek, you're an aspiring novelist, and you're in your first novel, right?
Yes.
So how is the process of creativity, and where do you get inspiration to write a novel? And how do you build a world of a novel?
So thank you for that question, Silwal. I'll be like, the process of creativity starts with, first of all, having the conversations with the similar creative people, like my conversations with the people around me. So on a given day, when I meet my students, when I meet my colleagues, we have conversations, right? And I bring it back to my room. As you guys would know that I'm living alone for the last 2 years, because of the nature of my job. So my family is in Delhi, but I live alone. Last year I was in Dehradun living alone, and from last year in the month of August I've been living alone in Kathmandu. And knowingly, I do not have a television in the place I live in.
We can second that because we're in his room right now.
Exactly. So it's not that I cannot afford a television, but it's just that I have knowingly made the decision. I've chose not to. Why? Because I'll tell you, two of my favorite writers, Haruki Murakami, the Japanese writer, Ernest Hemingway, the American writer. Now, these two writers are my inspiration to writing, and they tell, they tell to the aspiring writers, you got to spend some time in solitude.
Definitely.
If you have solitude, you can discover yourself, and you can discover the things around you, the people around you, and you can all write that down in your diary. That is the creative process, But I would like to pass on the question to Satyal, when you're busy with some schedule with your client, how do you make yourself, like Haruki Murakami says, every day he wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning and he writes for 2 hours. Are you that disciplined as a Haruki Murakami would be?
Well, if I was, then I'd probably
I'd be as famous
better.
as Murakami, right?
But my writing and thinking process is more towards the evening time. So especially after 8 o'clock, I love the yellow lights in my room. So I just stay alone. When you talk about
solitude, I love that expression, the yellow lights.
When you say that solitude, I just there's this think chair that's in my room. So is that. So it's been there. I just sit there. I just contemplate, and I also have something called a logbook. Again, this guy right here, this guy has been my inspiration for me. He suggested a book called Still Like an Artist.
Yeah.
So it talks about maintaining a logbook where you can just doodle and write your ideas down. So I just write it down, and other days I just open it and then write something related with it. So that's my process.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. There's a difference between solitude and loneliness. You need to know that.
Yes, right? Absolutely. I agree.
People talk about being, they alone, and they feel like, are you lonely? Or there's a vast difference between
alone and
being in solitude.
That is a wonderful point you just made.
So you need to know that. You need to get yourself to know that, and once you're doing that, probably you'll start writing, and that's how things come into. So because you're writing your first novel, can you share us something in your novel?
Because I would read. It is my pleasure. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Silwal and Satyal. So I'll just read a few lines from my upcoming novel, which I have a few names. I have not yet decided on which final name to
because
go for.
We know how hard it is to name something.
Absolutely, you guys are amazing. You guys would know it. All of us are creative in that way, and all of us are budding writers. So I'll just read a few lines from my upcoming novel. But I would request you guys to also read a few lines from your respective journals and logbooks.
So let's do it one para each for
one para each for all three of us. Great. So I'll start with my lines.
All right.
She was dressed in a simple salwar kameez of pink and blue prints. She was ethereal, almost magically drawn towards her. I was transported to the bygone era of poets and writers from the golden days. She looked the poetess that she was. In her eyes there was ada, and in her movements there was kasak. She was a poem all by herself. I couldn't help but get drawn magnetically towards this artistic girl. The best feeling was the experience of looking into her eyes. They were serene and calm like a red rosebud that was on the verge of being opened tenderly. And at the same time, there was a raging storm somewhere deep inside the vast ocean of her eyes.
Oh, wow. That is beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You guys are really motivating. You guys are motivating.
All right, so thank you so much. We are those two believers. So we believe in
we are believers.
I need all the encouragement. But I would like to pass it on to Silwal now. Yeah.
So I write this because I'm not much of a public writer. I write in closet and I keep it in my closet. So this was about the back how we face difficulty in writing and coming up. So it goes like this. Every so often, the evil key comes up with a human who is strong-willed. For every easy victory the evil key enjoys against these one-sentence wanderers, it cherishes the battle against those who have attempted to go the distance. Occasionally, the doomed human puts forth a defiant stance and plows towards a paragraph or two. But the evil key is devious. The evil key plays some of its most destructive weapons. Who would read your work anyways? It's silly. Even the most valiant human stutters at this moment. It's pointless, this key repeats. The human hesitates. Nothing makes sense. It's too complex. No one will understand what you're trying to say. They will just laugh at this. The human again contemplates. This is a lost cause. The human feels sadness flowing in the heart. The human tries to reason, but more often than not, ends up wiping the screen clean. So that's how.
Oh my God, that is profound. That is profound. Brilliant.
So that's how I write on, how we have the fear of writing, and it's all psychological, but I just put a character as a backspace key to put that out. So Satyal, let's hear.
Yes,
because I know
listen.
you have a poem in there.
Yeah. This is something that I wrote a few days
Yes.
back with those yellow lights. And it
Oh,
was at
amazing,
9
Satyal.
in the evening.
Please.
So this is a conversation between two people, the same person, but there are two people inside of that person. So this is how it is.
Brilliant.
Oh my good man, what is it that bothers you tonight? Is it only you sober rot, or the thousands outside who are contemplating on the inside? Asking, who are we and what are we after? Is it just me who longs for the answer? Oh my good man, no one is ever free of pain and suffering. But you tell me, my good man, is the pain for real, or is it just in my mind? I think it's the latter, my good man, for you are not your mind.
That is profound. That is really profound. I mean, it must have taken a lot of thought process to get into that conversation. So is it like you have conversations with yourself all the
Yeah,
time?
I do that a lot. And like Silwal said, I'm also someone who has to feel a lot to write that. I was probably sad or thinking about a lot of things. So I wrote this down, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
It is amazing.
So clap for all three of us.
Oh, it's just amazing. I think I clap for all three of us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. So it was really nice to know you. Your creative writing, it's going on. Your journey, that sounds like really nice. You're a Musafir in heart. You're a Musafir, in your name as well. So that's really wonderful. So we hope you have a wonderful time ahead.
Thank you so much.
Tell us when the book is out. We'll be happy to
Share it with our
everyone
Yes,
else.
surely. Thank you, Satyal and Silwal. I have sent a few chapters to a few publishers, and I'm just waiting for the final process. Once I get the green signal, the process will start. Maybe by the end of this year, maybe by the beginning of next year, the novel will be there definitely, and I would love to share it with all of your listeners.
All right, Abhijit, thank you so much for being on 18 Minutes with Satyal and Silwal. So listeners, we hope we inspired you to write more and to read more.
Even if you're not inspired, just write a paragraph down and send it to us.
We'll read it. You'll at least have two readers, right? All right, so listeners, that was the 19th episode of 18 Minutes with Satyal and
19th
Silwal.
or 17th?
It's 19th, man. You should
Oh shit!
You don't listen to our episodes. Anyways, we'll be back again
guys
next
are
Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. on YouTube and on SoundCloud. And a big thank you to our sponsors.
Country Yard Restaurant and Bar for giving us the space. Even though we're in Abhijit's house right now, they're always supporting us.
And also to Animax Trasta for his hacks and wonderful designs and
right.
technical inputs. All right, so what's one last thing that you want to tell our listeners?
Just start writing.
It's never too late to
Right.
write.